Hello and welcome back to Workforce Waves. This is Doug Foresta. I'll be your moderator for today's episode. My guest today is Oreste DAversa. He is the owner of Metropolitan Small Business Coaching and a certified professional coach. And today we're going to talk about a topic that you may have heard of, but may not be sure exactly what it is, which is quiet quitting. Also, we're going to talk about quiet firing, and I'm hoping we'll even touch on quiet hiring. So, Oreste, welcome. It's great to have you here.
Very good. Thank you, and thank you for having me.
Thank you. So, all right, before we start, maybe if you could just tell people a little bit about the work that you do so they just have a sense of who you are. Can you explain a little bit about the work that you do and how you work with people?
Sure. Technically, I'm a business coach, consultant, and trainer. As a coach, what I do is I help people with guidance. As a consultant, I actually do the work, do the deliverables. And as a trainer, I teach people. My recent venture has been writing a book called Life Beyond the Pandemic that helps people, basically wherever they are, find their true path, and in that find their either proper job and or possibly working for themselves. What's happened, obviously, the pandemic has had a major impact in the workforce with many people losing their livelihoods. And what I mean by that is obviously losing their job and or losing their businesses. So in the book, Life Beyond the Pandemic, what I do is I give people a blueprint to really get their druthers, get themselves on their feet, find their true path, and get back into the workforce and being financially productive again.
Well, that's great. And, you know, I think this is one of the things that's come out of the pandemic is this phenomenon of quiet quitting. I mean, it may have been around before, but it seems like it's come to the forefront. So explain to our listeners, you know, what is quiet quitting? What does that mean?
Well, the concept of quiet quitting is basically the follows, that as an employee, I'm just going to do the basics of my job. Whatever the job description is, I'm not going to do a step more than that. I'm not going to do one more task or duty past my job description. Basically, I'm shutting down to the company, and quiet quitting really is a misnomer because the person doesn't actually quit their job and go find another job. What they're doing is they're quitting internally in their minds and just doing the basics to keep their job.
And, you know, I know that we've been having, you know, such an issue with recruitment and retention post-COVID. It just seems like there's not enough workers, but you know, talk about the broader implications of what that means for a company, right? If I have people, so good news is I've got people, I'm staffed up, but some of them, maybe a significant portion, are quiet quitting. You know, what's the impact on a business?
Well, the impact is tremendous because what's happening is the organization as a whole is not reaching its goals and objectives, be it financial or being other goals and objectives. So what's happening is you have a organization. And again, this applies to whether the organization generates revenue or if it's a nonprofit. The concept's the same. What's happening is the people who are supposed to be doing work, producing, reaching certain goals and milestones are not. So it's impacting the company. So what ends up happening is we start having a situation where one piece of the company is losing, and then that affects the other part of the company, and they're losing. What we want is a win-win situation. We want to win for the employees, and we want to win for the employers. But this is starting the path of a win-lose situation or a possibly lose-lose situation.
You know, I was thinking about this, Oreste. I'm curious about your thoughts about this. So I think, as you said, about post the pandemic, we have seen more workers sort of take a different attitude towards work, and people wanting more flexibility or more, like wanting more work-life balance. What's the difference between that and quiet quitting?
Well, I think I'm not going to use the word revolution, but I am going to use the word evolution. I think we're seeing an evolution in the workplace where people, the idea of work is changing. And quiet quitting means I'm not really happy with my job and I'm just going to do the basics, as opposed to an evolution where I like to have a proper work-life balance. And I think we're evolving to something like that. And what we're seeing, for instance, in England, that may be happening here, is moving to a 4-day work week, where people obviously are working 4 days and off for 3, and they're finding, surprisingly enough, that those folks are even more productive working in 4 days, working 5, and that what might be happening here. And we saw this evolution back in the 1800s going to the 1900s when people were working a 6-day work week and working 18 hours a day, and they saw that really wasn't working and burning people out. So we might be getting now the same type of situation where we're having an evolution in work, and we may have to change the way we work and our work style and work performance and work goals and work achievements and work objectives. Because I think we're finding that we're moving more towards an information technology world versus back before it was more of a manufacturing type world. So again, I think we're seeing an evolution in the workplace between baby boomers and the younger generation, Gen X, Gen Z, millennials, etc.
Now, you mentioned manufacturing, and even that has turned into, manufacturing jobs are high-skilled labor now, right? It's not put the car door on the Ford anymore. It's more complicated than that. So, yeah, I think every industry is undergoing, as you said, an evolution. All right, so if I'm an employer, I'm a manager, I'm a leader, and I suspect or see that an employee looks like they're quiet quitting, what can I do to address that?
Well, the main thing, and this is what concerns me greatly, is communication. There has to be a communication between management and employees. Why are you slowing down? What's happening here? Tell me what's going on that your productivity has leveled off or is subpar. What can we do to change that? What can we do to motivate you, be it financial or otherwise? When we talk about motivating employees in compensation, compensation doesn't always have to be financial. It could be more flexible work schedule. It could be time off with pay or time off without pay. So I think we need to have employers get more creative in how they're remunerating employees, and I think that's the new evolution in the workplace. I think work is changing. Furthermore, very few organizations are not affected by the global economy in which we live, especially manufacturing, where we have goods and services now being traded worldwide. So I think we're going to start seeing an evolution in the workplace, and I think employers who are going to be competitive and keep a good team of employees are going to have to be just more creative in the way they retain employees and hire them as well.
Yeah, I like what you said about the communication, because there is something passive-aggressive about quiet quitting, isn't there?
Yes, exactly. It's again, unfortunately, organizations are like families, and like families, they have those interpersonal dynamics that all families do. Don't tell, I won't tell, you won't tell, you be good. She started first, he started first. We have certain dynamics that as humans and being in organizations are similar to the family dynamic of interpersonal skills.
I saw a training once that it said, "Does your organization need family therapy?" I think a lot of companies right now are in need of that. So, all right, so that's quiet quitting. I did say that I wanted to talk about quiet firing as well. So what is that?
Quiet firing is the concept where the employer now gives you as little work as possible, so you get the hint that you really should move on. You really aren't contributing to the organization. You're really not making a difference. For the most part, you probably don't want to be there. So the organization is gradually, I won't say pushing you out, but they're making you come to your own conclusion, like, what am I doing here? I'm not really doing nothing anymore. I'm not learning anything. I'm not making more money. Maybe it's time for me to move on. Obviously, companies are concerned about firing people because there are legalities involved, and many employees and employers sign employment contracts. So people and companies are more concerned about really just terminating people.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is basically a way to avoid things like lawsuits Is that the idea that this way you quit, I didn't fire you?
Exactly. You know, you quit on your own volition. We didn't terminate you for whatever. You know, and because again, especially now with legalities involved, because many positions now one signs an employment contract, and there are particulars in there that open expose companies to liability, so they're very careful about that. And also in this day and age, it's about appearances, it's about social media. No company wants to be seen plastered on social media as being a terrible place to work. You know, it's a salt mine. I was abused there, so no company wants that kind of publicity as well.
All right, so what do I do if I'm an employee and suddenly I realize that I'm being quiet fired? What can I do about that?
Well, we're back to communication again. You know, my suggestion is meet with your immediate supervisor, manager, whoever it is, and try to find out what's going on. Is there something that I did, something that I didn't do? How can we remedy this? If I'm willing to put myself on a 30-day plan, can I get back in good stead with the company and move forward with my life? We're always back to the bane of this thing is communication. You know, without communication, and you don't know why you're being quiet fired. And again, the person not being actually fired, but they're not being a productive member of the organization. Without that communication, it's hard to really assess what's really going on.
Yeah, I think that's one of the main things, right? If people take nothing else from this episode, is the idea that employers and employees need to communicate with each other. And sometimes those are hard conversations, and they might be hard to have. But if we avoid them, we end up with things like quiet hiring, we end up with things like quiet quitting and quiet firing. So, all right. So I did also mention this idea of quiet hiring, and that's a really interesting one too. How does one quiet hire? What does that look like? Well,
quiet hiring, and I'm going to try to squeeze in another one that I just heard literally a few hours ago, quiet promotion. But we're talking about quiet hiring now. It's getting to the point where nobody's talking to each other in organizations anymore. Quiet hiring is basically bringing a person on board, usually a person who's a freelancer or someone who's a 1099, and not telling anyone that they've been hired in the company, and just inject them into the daily workflow and pretend like this person has been with us all along, and the person is not really announced to the company in a proper way, and or he's not put on the payroll as a W-2 employee. But usually it's the importance of just bringing the person on board without telling anyone.
And what's the payoff there for an employer to do that?
Well, the payoff is obviously, you know, they're not paying benefits to the employee, because especially if they're a freelancer or a 1099, they're usually not paying benefits. They're usually not paying employer taxes. There are other probably fringe benefits that don't apply to the freelancer or the independent consultant, and so it saves the company money.
But how about the piece about not informing the rest of the team? What does the employer get out of that, of just sort of sneaking this person in, I guess you could say?
Yeah, yes. Well, again, we're always back to the communication. You know, with all these quiet terminology that we're seeing, we're back to not telling people about things, or not talking about them, or not communicating with them. So that's really the foundation of all this, that people are not being communicated with. And unfortunately, that's not a good thing. Organizations, again, be it revenue generating or nonprofits or whatever, are living, breathing things that there has to be communication, give and take, for an organization to be successful, productive, and meet their goals and objectives.
Do you think that quiet quitting, for example, is contagious? So when I'm thinking about culture, right, the culture of an organization. So let's say, I was a motivating employee, but I watched some of the people around me and they're quiet quitting. I mean, have you seen that it can take a toll on the culture of an organization?
Well, it's definitely not a good thing. It's definitely not a good thing. I'm not going to say it can become a cancer, but it's definitely going to impact the corporate culture and the way the company ebbs and flows, and the way the company really moves and grooves within and without. Because what starts happening, besides it being noticed within the company, people who interact, vendors who interact with that company, start seeing a different ebb and flow, a different personality of the company, and that sooner or later is going to affect the bottom line and/or their goals and objectives.
So, okay, so you mentioned another one, which was, you said you just heard about this one, which is quiet promotion. So
right.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, I just heard about this literally a few hours ago of one of the major media outlets. Quiet promotion is when you promote people within without telling anyone, so that the person gets the recognition for all their hard work, but no one else knows about it. So I guess by doing that, you don't set any type of jealousies up, or why did that person get promoted above me? So the person is quietly promoted. Obviously, they may or may not get pay raises, or they just may get a raise in their responsibilities, or whatever the case may be. But no one's being told about that. Again, we're back to communication, lack of it, secrecies. These are all dynamics that unfortunately erode the fabric of an organization.
And it's interesting because obviously employers. We have still a situation where employers are looking for, they're having trouble getting talent. And, once you do get talent, I think this is so important because, once you bring people in, this becomes a retention issue as well, right? All of this. If there's not communication, you ultimately, I would imagine, well, especially in the case of quiet firing, I guess you want the person out. But as a whole, I think this is something that's so important to look at, right? Because I would imagine, I guess, say more about the connection with this and retention, if there is one.
Well, you bring up a very good point and a very important point. The reality of it is, it costs you a lot more to bring someone on board, to find someone, than it is to keep someone. Being a former HR manager myself, a former executive recruiter, the cost to put ads in, interviewing people, reviewing credentials, vetting, the cost becomes expensive. How much is all relative to the type of industry you're in, but usually there is a cost in bringing people on board. So it's cheaper to keep with someone than it is to find someone new. That's why organizations need to reassess what's going on within the company, and that's the importance of an HR manager, HR department, and really everyone needs to talk. And unfortunately, my concern is this past 25 years. Very briefly, my background was 20 years in the technology industry. My concern is more and more people are living their lives behind a screen, and we're losing interpersonal skills. You cannot have certain dynamics with individuals just behind a screen. As the saying goes back in my generation, you cannot fax a handshake. You need to have eyeball contact. You need to see people's body language, their posture. You need to really understand, are they really understanding the words I'm saying? But you said this, but I felt this. Your words didn't match your actions. Your words didn't match your emotions. And I'm concerned that we're losing all that living behind screens.
Well, these are all really good things to think about. And I want to make sure if people want to learn more about you, Oreste, how can they do that?
Well, they can reach me on my website at www.metrosmallbusinesscoaching.com, and they're welcome to get a complimentary chapter of my book, Life Beyond the Pandemic, at www.lifebeyondthepandemic.com, and the book is also available in your local bookstore and on Amazon.com.
Oreste, thank you so much. I learned some new things today. Quiet quitting, quiet firing, quiet hiring, quiet promotion. So I've learned some new things. I'm sure that our listeners have as well. Thank you for coming on and sharing your words of wisdom with us.
Thank you once again for having me, and have a good day.
Thank you. Hey, all right. I thought there was a lot of good stuff in there. You shared a lot of that was interesting, even the quiet promotion one.
Yeah, I heard about it literally. I saw it on LinkedIn a half hour before we spoke today.
Yeah, I mean, really, at the end of the day, you could replace the word quiet exactly with, passive aggressiveness, lack of communication.
Without question, without a doubt. Yeah, obviously, for media packaging, it's just that they're packaging with the quiet,
right. It sounds better.
It sounds. But the concepts are the same. My concern is that everyone's just going into their own brain, into their own head, and they're not really communicating with other people. And that's the main concern.
And I agree with you about the technology that we're losing. We're losing our interpersonal skills. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate the time, and then also on Friday.
Okay, very good. Again, Friday is also another telephone conversation, correct?
Yep, exact same. You'll dial into the same number.
Okay, very good. Thanks again, and I'll talk to you on Friday.
All right, take care.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Goodbye.